In a quiet supermarket aisle, a little girl sat all alone, watching people buy food she could never afford. No one noticed her, until a millionaire CEO in a sky blue suit stopped and asked, "Girl, what are you doing here?" What happened next would melt even the coldest heart. This story will take you through suspense, heartbreak, and a powerful lesson that will change the way you see kindness forever. The supermarket was alive that evening. Carts rolled, children laughed, and families chatted about what to cook for dinner. The smell of baked bread drifted from the bakery, mixing with the cool air from the frozen section. It was the kind of place where life moved fast, people rushing, paying, and leaving. But in the corner, near the very last checkout, sat a little girl, her tiny back pressed against the cold wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her blonde hair was messy, tied in a half-broken ribbon. Her dress, once pink, had faded into pale fabric, and her little shoes looked worn and cracked. She wasn't playing with toys. She wasn't asking for candy. She wasn't even smiling. She was simply watching, her wide blue eyes fixed on the moving belts, where food after food passed before her. Loaves of bread, juicy oranges, boxes of cereal, fresh meat. Every item seemed to shine in her hungry gaze. But no one asked her why she was there. Mothers pulled their children closer, whispering not to stare. Fathers looked away, busy with their wallets. Cashiers scanned items, ignoring the quiet little figure. Jenny was her name. Only 5 years old, yet her silence spoke louder than a scream. Every time a packet of cookies slid past her eyes, her lips pressed tighter. Every time a bottle of milk was bagged, her small stomach growled. She never complained. She never begged. She just sat and watched. The world rushed past her. Shoppers filled their carts without noticing her hunger. Employees walked by, too busy to bend down and ask. To everyone, she was just a shadow. But then footsteps slowed. A tall man in a sky blue suit stopped in the middle of the checkout lane. Unlike the others, he didn't walk past. He didn't pretend she wasn't there. He turned, and his sharp gray eyes locked on hers. His name was Patrick Carter. A man of 34, a millionaire CEO, respected and feared in boardrooms. He had signed contracts worth millions, spoken to presidents and kings. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time in years, something pierced through the walls around his heart. A little girl sitting alone at the checkout corner had stopped his world. Patrick's chest tightened as he took a slow step toward her. His expensive shoes clicked against the tiles, echoing louder in the silence between them. Jenny blinked, startled by the stranger's attention. No one ever stopped, no one ever cared. But this man in the sky blue suit, was different. And neither of them knew it yet. But that single moment, at the corner of a busy supermarket, was about to change both of their lives forever. Patrick Carter's steps slowed as he reached the small figure on the floor. All around them, life continued, the beep of scanners, the chatter of families, the rustle of plastic bags. But to Patrick, the world had gone quiet. There was only the little girl sitting curled up, staring at food she could not have. His tall frame cast a shadow over her. Jenny's head lifted slowly, her blue eyes locking on his sharp, unfamiliar face. For a moment, fear flickered in her gaze. She had learned early that strangers rarely brought kindness. Patrick's chest tightened. He didn't want to frighten her. He didn't want to be just another adult who looked, pitied, and walked away. So instead of towering above her, he did something no one expected. He bent down. His polished shoes creaked against the tile. His expensive sky blue suit brushed against the dusty supermarket floor. And then Patrick, billionaire, CEO, man of power, was kneeling in front of a 5-year-old girl. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice low and gentle. No commanding tone, no cold edge, just warmth. "Are you lost?" Jenny didn't speak. Her tiny hands squeezed her knees tighter, and she shook her head quickly. Her blonde curls bounced, her ribbon slipping free. Patrick tried again, his voice even softer. "Do you have someone here with you? Your mom? Your dad?" Another shake of her head. Patrick's throat tightened. She was alone. A child. Barely 5. Alone in a supermarket filled with hundreds of people. He let out a slow breath. Her eyes, those innocent blue eyes, weren't focused on him. They were focused on the checkout belt just behind him, on the loaves of bread, on the bananas, on the cartons of milk. Patrick's heart broke in silence. This little girl wasn't lost. She was hungry. He leaned a little closer, his voice trembling with care. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Her lips quivered, as if the truth was too heavy to say. She didn't answer, but her tiny throat moved as she swallowed hard. And then, slowly, she gave the smallest nod. Patrick felt something inside him crack wide open. He had built towers of glass and steel, earned fortunes beyond measure. But none of that had prepared him for this moment. Kneeling on a supermarket floor, facing the raw, unspoken pain of a child. Without thinking, he extended his hand. "Come with me," he whispered. "We'll fix this, I promise." But Jenny didn't move. Her eyes darted between his hand and his face, full of suspicion. Her world had not taught her to trust. And Patrick, for the first time in his life, felt suspense coil around his heart. Would she trust him? Would she take his hand? Or would she turn away, believing that even this kind face would leave her behind? In that breathless pause, Patrick realized something. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about charity. This was about a little girl who needed someone to care. And he silently vowed he would be that someone. Patrick's hand remained in the air, steady but gentle, waiting for the little girl's choice. To anyone passing by, it might have looked ordinary, just a man offering help. But inside, it felt like the most fragile, life-changing moment of his entire existence. Jenny stared at his hand as if it were a trick. Her small fingers trembled against her knees. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel safe. But her young heart carried lessons of disappointment, lessons a child should never learn. Her blue eyes darted upward to meet his. Patrick didn't blink. He let her see the truth in his gaze. No greed, no pity, no impatience. Only sincerity. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "Not ever." But Jenny still didn't move. She hugged her legs tighter, her body rocking slightly, as though she was trying to protect herself from the world. Patrick's heart squeezed painfully. If he pushed too hard, she would run. If he stayed silent, she might slip back into the shadows of neglect. He needed her to know he wasn't leaving. So slowly, Patrick shifted. Instead of keeping his hand high above her, he lowered himself further until he was sitting on the cold supermarket floor beside her. The sound of his expensive suit brushing against the tile turned heads. A few shoppers frowned, whispering, wondering why a millionaire CEO was sitting cross-legged like a child. But Patrick didn't care, not about the whispers, not about the stares. The only thing that mattered was the little girl at his side. Jenny blinked in surprise. No adult had ever humbled themselves like that. He wasn't towering over her anymore. He wasn't another giant stranger. He was right there, at her level, like a friend. Patrick placed his hand on the floor, close enough for her to see but not to fear. "You don't have to say yes right away," he told her softly. "I'll sit here as long as you need me to. I'm not in a hurry." Those words hung in the air like a lifeline. Jenny's small shoulders trembled. No one had ever waited for her before. No one had ever given her the power to choose. Her lips moved silently, testing the words before they escaped. "Promise?" she whispered. Her voice was so small, Patrick almost didn't hear it. But he did. And he answered without hesitation. "Cross my heart." For the first time, a flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. She studied his face again, searching for cracks, for lies. But all she found was kindness. With a breath so soft it barely stirred the air, Jenny lifted her tiny hand. It shook as it hovered near his. And then, like a delicate bird landing on a branch, her palm pressed against his. Patrick's heart nearly burst. Her hand was so small, so fragile it almost didn't cover his palm. He curled his fingers gently around hers, careful not to frighten her, careful not to break the trust she was gifting him. In that instant, the suspense shattered into relief. She had chosen him. She had trusted him. And Patrick silently vowed he would never betray that trust, no matter what it cost. As he helped her rise to her feet, Jenny looked up at him with wide eyes. And though she didn't smile, there was a softness there. A quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible anymore. And Patrick knew. He would give up every fortune he had before he let this child go hungry again. Patrick stood tall again, still holding Jenny's small hand. Her grip was light, as if she feared he might pull away at any moment. But he didn't. He squeezed gently. reassuring her that he meant what he said. Around them, shoppers continued moving, too busy to notice the silent bond forming. But to Patrick, the supermarket suddenly felt like the most important place in the world. He crouched slightly, speaking in a voice soft enough for only her to hear. "Let's get you something to eat, sweetheart. Tonight, you're the boss." Jenny's brows furrowed in confusion. Her lips trembled. "Me?" she whispered. "Yes, you," Patrick said with a warm smile. "You'll tell me what we buy, and I'll listen." Her little eyes widened. It felt impossible. Adults never asked her what she wanted, but Patrick waited patiently, his expression calm, his hand steady. Slowly, Jenny raised her finger and pointed at the bread on the shelf. Patrick picked up a loaf and placed it in the cart. The sound of the plastic crinkling seemed to echo with meaning. It was the sound of her first choice being honored. She pointed again, this time at bananas. Patrick added them. Then cookies. Then a small box of cereal with colorful drawings on the cover. Item after item, she chose carefully, like each was a treasure. Patrick placed every single one in the cart. No hesitation, no question. The cart began to fill, not with champagne, caviar, or imported chocolates like Patrick's usual purchases, but with the simple food a child longed for. And with every item, Jenny's small shoulders straightened a little more. Her trust, once fragile as glass, was slowly taking root. At last, they approached the checkout counter. The beeping of the scanner filled the air as the cashier lifted each item from the cart. Jenny's face grew worried. She tugged lightly at Patrick's sleeve. Her voice was soft, breaking. I don't have money." Patrick's chest ached at her words. She had learned to carry shame that should never belong to a child. Kneeling once again, he brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "You don't ever need to worry about that, Jenny. I have enough for both of us." Jenny stared at him, her eyes wide, as if waiting for a catch. But Patrick smiled and gently tapped her nose. "This is on me." The cashier gave Patrick a curious look, but he ignored it. For the first time in his life, money didn't feel like numbers on a screen or signatures on contracts. It felt like bread. It felt like bananas. It felt like cookies in the small hands of a little girl. As the last item was bagged, Patrick placed his card on the counter with calm authority. Transaction approved. A simple beep. But to Jenny, it was the sound of hope becoming real. Patrick handed her a small bag of cookies before the rest. She hesitated, her little hands hovering. Then slowly she accepted them. She looked up at him, her lips parting, as if she wanted to say thank you. But the words caught in her throat. Her silence spoke louder than any voice could. Patrick smiled, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pride. It wasn't success. It was something purer, joy born from giving. Together, hand in hand, they walked out of the supermarket. One man, once lonely despite his millions. One child, once invisible despite her innocence. And in their shared bag of bread and bananas, a new chapter of their lives was waiting to unfold. The drive to Patrick's estate was silent at first. Jenny sat in the passenger seat, her small hands clutching the cookie bag like it was treasure. Her eyes flickered between the window and Patrick's calm profile. Every so often, she would glance at him as if making sure he wasn't going to disappear. Patrick kept his voice low, gentle. "You're safe now," he said, breaking the silence. "No one's going to hurt you tonight." Jenny didn't reply, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. When the car finally turned down a long driveway, her mouth parted in awe. Lights glowed along the path. At the end stood a beautiful house, large but warm, not cold like a castle. To Jenny, it looked like something out of a fairy tale. Patrick parked and stepped out, walking around to open her door. He offered his hand again. She hesitated, then placed her tiny fingers in his. They walked toward the house together. Instead of leading her into the main mansion, Patrick guided her to a smaller, cozier guest house behind it. The porch light glowed softly and the scent of flowers drifted in the night air. "This is where I want you to feel at home," Patrick said. Jenny's eyes darted around the small living room as they entered. A soft rug covered the floor. Books lined the shelves. And the fireplace, though unlit, promised warmth. Her stomach growled softly and Patrick chuckled. "All right, little boss, let's make dinner." He rolled up his sleeves and walked to the kitchen, pulling out pasta, butter, and cheese. Jenny sat at the wooden table, swinging her legs nervously, watching him cook. The smell of garlic and butter soon filled the room. Her lips parted as she leaned forward, eyes wide with hunger. Patrick placed a steaming bowl in front of her. Jenny looked at it as though it were magic. "Is this really for me?" she whispered. Patrick knelt beside her chair, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart, every bite." She picked up the fork with trembling fingers. The first taste made her eyes close. She chewed slowly, savoring the warmth, the comfort. And then, unable to resist, she began to eat faster, spoon after spoon. Patrick watched, his chest tight, tears threatening to fall. He had dined in the world's finest restaurants, but nothing had ever moved him like watching a little girl eat her fill for the first time. When her bowl was empty, Jenny leaned back with a sigh of relief. Her eyelids drooped, heavy with sleep, but her small voice whispered, "You're nice." Patrick's throat ached. He placed a blanket gently over her as she curled up on the sofa, hugging a pillow. "You deserve a world that's kind, Jenny," he murmured, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "And I'll make sure you have it." She was already drifting into dreams, her breaths soft and steady. Patrick stood back, his heart trembling with something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The mansion had always been silent, filled with wealth but empty of laughter. But now, with the little girl sleeping peacefully in the guest house, it felt like light had returned. And Patrick knew deep inside that his life would never be the same again. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of the guest house. Birds chirped outside, filling the air with gentle music. Jenny stirred, rubbing her eyes, still wrapped in the soft blanket Patrick had given her. For the first time in a long time, she had slept without fear. Patrick was already awake. Not in his office, not buried in calls or contracts, he was in the kitchen making breakfast. He set a plate of pancakes on the table, with syrup and strawberries. When Jenny sat up, her nose twitched at the sweet smell. "Good morning, sunshine," Patrick said warmly. Jenny blinked at him, then whispered, "Morning." Her voice was still shy, but softer now, like a flower opening slowly. He guided her to the table. As she ate, Patrick studied her. Every bite she took, every glance she gave him, reminded him of the night before. This wasn't just about food. This was about giving her what she had been denied: safety, care, love. But Patrick knew he couldn't keep her story a mystery forever. He needed to know where she came from, why she had been alone at that supermarket. So, after breakfast, he made phone calls, not to stockholders or directors, but to social workers, lawyers, and child protection agencies. The process was slow, filled with questions, forms, and promises. Patrick, who had once commanded armies of assistants, now found himself learning patience. He stayed by Jenny's side through it all, never letting her feel abandoned. Days turned into weeks. Jenny's laughter began to echo in Patrick's halls. She drew pictures for him, stick figures holding hands, smiling under a bright sun. She placed them proudly on his refrigerator. The once empty mansion now carried the marks of a child's joy. At night, Patrick would read her stories, his deep voice softening into warmth. Jenny, curled under blankets, would slowly close her eyes to his words. Sometimes, just before sleep, she would whisper things that shattered his heart. "I like it here. It's warm. I feel safe." But one night, as Patrick tucked her in, something happened that he would never forget. Jenny held his hand tightly, her little eyes serious. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daddy." Patrick froze. The word wrapped around his heart like fire and silk at once. Tears welled in his eyes as he squeezed her hand back. He knelt beside her bed, his voice trembling. "I'll be your dad forever, Jenny. Forever." She smiled, finally, pure, innocent, radiant. It was the kind of smile money could never buy, and Patrick realized in that moment he had been searching for this all his life. He wasn't just a millionaire CEO anymore. He was a father. He was her safe place, her home, her light. And beyond their home, whispers of his act of kindness spread through quiet corners of the community. Not through media, not through headlines, but through the eyes of people who had seen him kneel in that supermarket, who had seen him hold a child's hand instead of walking past. The lesson was clear. No child should be invisible in plain sight. No one should ignore hunger when it stares at us. True wealth is not measured in dollars or power, but in kindness and love. Patrick Carter had once been respected for his business empire. Now he was remembered for something far greater, for noticing a little girl when no one else did, for proving that compassion can change a life. Jenny, once the quiet child at the checkout, was no longer hungry, no longer unseen. She was loved. She was cherished. She was home. And together, they showed the world that sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the greatest fortune of all.